What is a content-based restriction? A content-based restriction is a limitation on speech imposed by the government that is based on the subject matter or the message being expressed. In other words, the government regulates what is being said rather than how or when it is said. Because such restrictions strike at the heart of free expression, they are considered highly suspect under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and are subject to the most demanding form of judicial review: strict scrutiny. The origins of the doctrine can be traced to the early development of First Amendment jurisprudence in the 20th century. The framers of the Constitution intended freedom of speech to serve as a safeguard against government control of ideas and political dissent. As courts interpreted the First Amendment, they distinguished between regulations that merely address the time, place, and manner of speech, such as requiring permits for parades, and those that discriminate based on the actual content of the message. The latter, courts reasoned, carry a far greater risk of censorship and abuse. The Supreme Court has repeatedly emphasized that content-based restrictions are presumptively unconstitutional. To survive strict scrutiny, the government must show two things. First, that the restriction serves a compelling state interest, and second, that the law is narrowly tailored to achieve that interest in the least restrictive way possible. Very few laws meet this standard, which is why most content-based restrictions are struck down. Classic examples of content-based restrictions include laws that prohibit speech criticizing the government, laws banning specific viewpoints on controversial issues, or laws that allow one side of a debate but not the other. For instance, a city ordinance that bans political signs supporting candidate A but allows signs for candidate B would be a clear content-based restriction. Similarly, a law forbidding protests about war but allowing protests about environmental issues discriminates based on content. The Supreme Court case Police Department of Chicago v. Mosley, 1972, illustrates this principle. The city banned picketing near schools, but made an exception for labor picketing. The court struck down the law, holding that government cannot regulate speech differently based on its subject matter. Another major case, Reed v. Town of Gilbert, 2015, invalidated a local sign code that treated political, ideological, and directional signs differently. The court ruled that such distinctions were content-based and subject to strict scrutiny, which the town could not satisfy. There are, however, certain categories of speech not protected by the First Amendment, such as obscenity, defamation, incitement, and true threats, where content-based regulation is permissible. Even so, the government must define these categories narrowly to avoid sweeping unprotected speech. It is important to contrast content-based restrictions with content-neutral regulations. Content-neutral laws do not focus on what is being said, but rather on the circumstances of the speech. For example, a rule prohibiting the use of loudspeakers in residential neighborhoods after midnight is content-neutral because it applies to all speech equally, regardless of message. Courts are much more lenient with such rules, reviewing them under intermediate scrutiny. A curiosity about content-based restrictions is that sometimes they are disguised as neutral regulations, but on closer inspection are revealed to be content-based. Courts carefully examine whether a law truly applies equally to all speech or whether it subtly favors or disfavors certain topics or viewpoints. This line of analysis makes First Amendment law one of the most complex and dynamic areas of constitutional law. In conclusion, a content-based restriction is a government regulation that targets the message or subject matter of speech. Because it poses a serious threat to free expression and democratic debate, it is presumptively unconstitutional and rarely upheld under strict scrutiny. The doctrine reflects the deep constitutional commitment to ensuring that ideas, whether popular or controversial, can circulate freely without government interference. Above, I leave you more videos so you can continue learning law. Remember to give us a like and subscribe.